Hello and welcome to Working with Wonder. I'm actually going to get into dealing with causes of death in in the database finally because I've been starting to do blog posts with regards to causes of death. I've really wanted to get into not COVID but other causes. And to remind you, I'm a life actuary. I'm using the data. I'm familiar with aspects of the data on the death certificates. I'm going to start out very easy. In this video, I'm going to show you how to deal with 15 leading causes of death and how to do that query. This is not how I created my table and my graphs, okay? But I want to show you how to do this. So I'm using the underlying cause of death database on wonder.cdc.gov. Reminder, each death certificate has just one underlying cause of death. I will eventually get to the multiple cause of death databases, and I will explain how those work when I get to them, but I am not dealing with that today. So let's get to the query and note group results by 15 leading causes, and I'm just going to start with that. Okay, there's two different ones, and I'm just going to start with 15 leading causes and send without changing anything to the default settings and then explain what happens. Okay, so when you group results by 15 leading causes, results are initially ordered by death counts, total rows, all these other things are not available. And then I can change the ordering if I want to, which I'm not going to. It only gives you the top 15. I'm going to explain what you're looking at here because this might look kind of strange to you, especially when you see these counts. This may look totally insane. So you might need to understand what we actually got back here because I did not change this from the default. So you see, a lot of, like you don't even see COVID here, and you might be thinking, well, where's COVID? COVID's not on this list, and you'll see why in a moment. Okay, so the top billing goes to diseases of the heart, so heart disease, and you'll see these, a letter and then 2 digits. This is the ICD-10 codes. Let me try to remember what ICD, it's something classification of diseases, maybe international classification of diseases, doesn't matter. So the ICD-10 codes are what we use for identifying the different causes of death, and then they're grouped together in various categories. There is something called the 113 list of deaths. I will be doing a future video of what happens when you group by that list of 113. And then you see these little hashtags in front of them. The hashtags are what are called rankable causes. In that list of 113, I think there's 50 or 51 causes that are considered rankable. These are non-overlapping causes, so these don't overlap. They don't cover all the possible causes of death, but they don't overlap, so you don't have to worry about double counting deaths, so that's great. The next one is malignant neoplasms, which is cancer. Okay, cerebrovascular diseases, which is primarily stroke. Chronic lower respiratory diseases. Okay, so stuff in the lungs, can't breathe, have problems. Accidents, unintentional injuries. Unfortunately, this is a huge category as car crashes, old people falling down, drug overdoses that were unintentional, not suicide, etc. Next is Alzheimer's. Then we have diabetes. Then flu and pneumonia. This is not COVID. COVID has its own code. We'll see that in a moment. Nephritis, so this is all kidney disease. Then we have suicide, septicemia, so septic shock, all that kind of thing. We have liver disease, hypertension, other hypertension, then Parkinson's disease, and then homicide. And these are not crime statistics. Actually, I had to get into that with somebody recently. And this will not match up with FBI statistics, and I don't want to get into that here. And why does the CDC? These are death certificates, okay? Death certificates do not wait around for the court system. When we look at these numbers, you're like, 14 million, what the heck? There were 3 million people died in 2020. Well, when I pulled this is for the entirety of 1999 through 2020, which is a 22-year period. So full year 1999, that's 1 year. 2000, that's year number 2. And then 2001, so then we got 3 years. And then if you count it up, it's 22 years worth of deaths. If you look at the population and the crude rate, population 6.7 billion people. Yeah, so we're counting the people over multiple years. So what if I just wanted the top 15 causes of deaths for 2020? So let's go back to our request form, and we're going to just get 2020. So we'll go down here, and we just want, select year and month, I just want 2020. And I want the top 15 causes of death for 2020. COVID should show up on that, right? It's number 3. Ta-da! It's number 3, and we see the code for COVID. It is a rankable cause of death. It's got its own code, U. So a lot of extra things get a U, and it got its own new code, U07.1 for COVID-19. And you see the population that we're using for the rate for that year. Heart disease and cancer still outranked COVID for 2020. And then we have accidents, a stroke, chronic lower respiratory disease, Alzheimer's, etc. Now, so when you do top 15 causes of death, you can't pick anything else to aggregate by. If I go back to my request form, so anyway, this is not all, this is just the top 15, and it's just going to go, if I try to group by anything else, so like if I try to group by, say, a month, it's going to give me an error. You can't combine it with anything else. So I have to put this back to none. Okay, so I have to reset that to none. I'm going to see if it's going to let me do any of these other items. I don't know if it lets me do that, so let me try that. For 2020. Okay, so it is giving me the rates. The crude rate, remember, is just the number of people who died divided by the population. So, the rank ordering for the crude rates are going to be exactly the same as the rank ordering for the number of deaths because of that. That is not necessarily the case for the age-adjusted death rates, because the age-adjusted death rates are a weighted average where you do it by age grouping. Now, heart disease and cancer, still heart disease is highest and then cancer. We see COVID is at 85. Okay. Then let's take a look. Accidents at 57.6. It's still in the order that we're seeing. It's still in the order. So, it's not too different. I'm just taking a look now. Here we go. Chronic liver disease. We see that if we ranked this by age-adjusted death rate, liver disease would be above flu and kidney disease. Oh, suicide would hop up the list. And that's because younger people are committing suicide than older people. And then these are lower. And so when older people are dying, for age-adjusted death rates, if you have younger people dying, when younger people are dying at higher rates, that's going to boost the age-adjusted death rates. Okay, so let me go back to the request form. And I'm not going to spend a lot more time on this because the reason I'm showing this to you, this is not how I did my ranking tables. This is not how I did my graphs, just letting you know. That said, you may have an interest for your state, for where you live, for your demographic group. You may be interested, what were the leading causes of death in 2020? Or, it doesn't even have to be 2020, it could be a specific month in 2020. So like if I want a specific month or day of the week, let's see if it's going to let me open it. You gonna let me open the month? Okay, I just said open for 2020. I said open. So I might be interested in just before, maybe not April, but like, let's just say February. I'm kind of curious. February 2020, what were the top 15 causes of death in February 2020? Okay. And, oh, I'm sorry, it won't give me rates, and I should have removed all of that, but let's just not worry about it. So I have heart disease, then cancer, then accidents, then chronic lower. I mean, we're getting the standard ones. We see flu here, diabetes, the kidney, chronic liver, suicide, pneumonitis. So people aspirating stuff in their lungs, and that tends to be older people. Parkinson's disease. So this is actually a pretty standard ranking list, especially in the winter. If you checked it against, say, February 2019, you would see a similar list. But if I go back to my request form and then switched it to, instead of February 2020 and looked at, say, April 2020, let's see, COVID should pop. Okay, COVID was number 2 then. Okay, so it was even higher than cancer. And that's when we had that spike in New York. Okay, I'm going to reset the form because I kind of went too far into the weeds. Oops. Please reset. Go back to my 15 leading causes of death. And let's say I'm curious specifically 35 to 44-year-olds, women. Okay, so yeah, I'll just say 35 to 44-year-olds, women in 2020. Maybe I'm interested in a particular demographic group. What were the top 15 in 2020? Where did COVID land for them, say? So COVID was number 4. Accidents were pretty high. Now for that age group, that would be mainly car crashes and drug overdoses probably. Then cancer, then heart disease. They're not that old. So when you're not that old, you're expecting cancers to be higher than heart disease for deaths. It's also not a lot of deaths. So you look at this rate. It's giving us a crude rate. And note, when you do the data pull, so this is the numerical result, and you can export it and stuff like that. It will give you the information of what was involved in your query below. So here's your query criteria. Female, 35 to 44 years old for 2020, and then you're doing 15 leading causes of death. If we go back to our request form, and I want to show you 15 leading causes of death, and we're going to do infant mortality. If we're going to do infant mortality, I'm going to do under 1 year, all gender, and I'll keep it on 2020. Okay, there's a different cause of death list for infant mortality, just because. Okay, things that kill when you're under 1 year old, it's a different kind of thing. So you see congenital malformations, so congenital problems, short gestation, low birth weight, SIDS. So these are things that pertain specifically to infant mortality. A lot of these, placenta, cord, and membranes, does not apply to full-grown adults. So they have a different ranking list when it's for infant mortality versus when it's for adults. When I did a recent ranking thing, I did not use this 15 leading causes, and I was doing a whole bunch of data pulls. I was not using this. I used the 113 list, the full list, and I was doing it all at once. So I didn't want to break out a different list for the infant mortality for ranking. So these are a different ranking list when you look at infant mortality. And that's just something to know. It's, a little detail, but it's, good to know that they use something different. So anyway, If you want to investigate for yourself, I go back to the request form. I was just talking about demographics. You can pick the geography you want to look at. So you can pick state, you can pick city, you can pick, actually, you can even pick top 15 among a certain set of causes of death, but I'm not going to get that persnickety here. So you can do state, census regions, HHS regions. You can do geographic search. So this is at the state level. If I was interested in what were the top causes of death in New York, let me get off of infants. I want to go back to adults, right? So, and let me go back to all ages. All ages in New York in 2020, top 15, since I'm in New York State. And I want to see what that looked like. And maybe I want to compare against different states. COVID was number 2 in New York because, of course, New York State, particularly because of New York City, was hard hit by COVID. If I wanted to compare that, so we see a 184.8 for our crude rate. Let's say I wanted to compare that against, Florida. What was Florida looking like in 2020? Remember, this is for full year 2020. So you see COVID is down here at 88.5. You got to remember, and I don't have an agenda here with regards to this. There's different age distributions, but more specifically, you need to remember what was happening in 2020. The worst hit for mortality in 2020 was in spring 2020. We didn't get a whole bunch of COVID deaths outside of that New York City area until January 2021. So if you are looking for like a whole bunch of COVID deaths in Florida, for example, that didn't peak until January 2021. And that's true for California, a lot of other states as well. So, I'm not picking on New York versus Florida versus Tennessee or whatever. Most of the states outside the New York City, DC, and all that actually saw most of their COVID deaths in 2021, not in 2020. New York City saw it in 2020, saw their worst hit in 2020. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, so you can do some investigations with the 2020 numbers. I'll show some 2021 provisional numbers another time. Anyway, enjoy.